Hey guys, Brian Castro here with Better Chess Training, and in today's video, going to be playing someone I played before, Papa Fred. He's a tough opponent, and um, I've played him a few times. Let me see if I can find his record against me. Actually we are 3-3-1. So I've had three games against him, three wins, three losses, and a draw. So we'll see how we do here. Time control is 25 minutes with a 10-second increment. So that's a decent time control for online. Um, so I'm looking forward to this. Here, starting out to my Colle system, which you've probably seen on this channel before. I considered playing some different openings, and I've decided that I want to play my best openings here, unless I'm making a specific video about another opening. But I want to play my best videos here because I want to try to explain the chess concepts as best I can. Okay, so in this case, Black is playing this variation here with Bishop to G4, and I actually have a very specific line I play against it, and it starts here with H3. And the best move here is to either just bring this bishop back, or maybe to just take here on f3, because if he moves it back to h4, I'm going to attack it. I'll have to show you that line some other time. Here he gives up the two bishops, but my queen here is a little bit exposed. So now the question is how to develop the rest of my forces before I move on. Typically, I move my bishop here to d3, and that's not such a bad move, but I think I'm going to develop this knight first. I'd like to put this knight on f3, I think, because I want to castle that way, and I might want to play c4 in one go. So I think I'm going to play my knight out first. And typically, in the Kali, a lot of times you play e4, but because of the way he opened, I can switch over to c4, more of a Queen's Gambit flavor. Um, okay. Just thinking for a moment which way I want to go here. One way to play bishop to d3, castle, and then go ahead and play e4. Reason that might be attractive is because without his light square bishop, it's a little harder for him to contest e4. So I might do that, and that frees this bishop. The c4 plan is a little bit different because then maybe I'd be developing the bishop this way. So I think I'm going to go with kind of the standard Kali plan here because this dark square bishop, it's going to be hard to get this bishop to play this way. I think coming in over here might be better. I could be wrong. I think both of them are fine. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and castle. And I recommend castling a lot. I know I've been talking to some of my students, my young students, and a lot of them don't like to castle because they end up they get up attacked on the king side. Well, it's not castling's fault, and there are some openings that lead to that, but it's much better than in the center. And I think I have a few videos about being attacked in the center here. So let's see here. Can I play e4 right now? So here's the idea: e4, and then d takes e4, knight takes d4, and then if knight takes d4, queen takes d4, and then we're attacking this pawn on b7 as well. So actually that's pretty attractive. And then if he attacks me, if he tries to drive me away, then that's okay also. So I think I'm in pretty good shape that way. Let's and I can always play c3 to protect there. So I think e4 is good right now. Let's see, e4, what else can he do? He loses a... No, he doesn't lose a pawn, but he could take with the knight right away. And then I would just take with the knight, and with the same type of opening. So let's try that. I think this is attractive here because normally when this knight gets exchanged, then the knight on d7 just pops over to f6, and he's going to have to do that anyway to defend h7. But his pawn is hanging here, so that's a difference than other positions like that. Okay, so I'm going to play my knight over, and he actually doesn't have to take this knight. Um, but now you can see this bishop is opened up a little. It could go to f4 or maybe g5. So there's a lot of this game is starting off well for me, I think, and also all because he took this bishop here with that bishop to g4. Okay, let's be careful here before I make any quick moves. So the idea here is if I take with the queen, I'm threatening checkmate. So he has to respond, and then there's no response that will also protect this pawn. Now let's go a step further. Let's say he plays knight to f6, and then I take here. Now he can't take my d pawn, so with his queen. But then if he takes my d pawn, then his c pawn is hanging. So I think I'm in pretty good shape. And then if he defends there, so I'd be a pawn up. So I think this is the best move. So knight to f6 is what I'm expecting. Queen takes b7. If he plays queen takes d4, I can take here with queen takes c7. And if he plays bishop to d6, then I could even play something just like queen to c4 to try to trade off queens and while being a pawn up. Okay, so queen over. Because he doesn't have his light square bishop, there's less chance of my queen getting trapped. So one thing you got to be careful of when taking the like the b7 pawn here is the different dangers of having this queen trapped. Okay, so let me look at this real quick. Queen takes c7, and then what can he do? He doesn't have any threats against me here. He can threaten me with the rook, in which case I can just come over here to say a5, or even over here to g3. He can also do something like I said, bishop to d6, in which case I think queen to c4 to trade off queens is fine here. Okay, let's take on c7. Okay, there's that bishop to d6. So what I'm seeing here is if I do play this queen to c4, he might try something like queen to e5, threatening checkmate here. I can prevent it, but I have to be careful. Another move I could play is queen to a5, which would cover the e5 square, and then, well, let's see here. Or I could just play queen to c3, but then if he takes on c3, the c3 very. Queen to c4, queen to e5. And actually, I play. Can I just play f4 to stop it? but then he has a check here. So not quite sure here. I am up a pawn now, but now my queen, I need to find a productive way to get the queen back into play. Um, I like queen to a5, and maybe and then followed up. Let's see here. This is where it gets a little bit. Sometimes when you win material, you need to figure out. Sometimes your pieces get uncoordinated. Kind of like my queen is a little out here in left field, so I need to find a way to bring it back here, um, and try to find a way that doesn't get me checkmated if possible. So. Um, let's see. So I've got queen to c4 is one of my options, queen to a5, queen to c3, probably the least favorable of my options, but one that I will consider if it's the best option there. I can even do something like queen to b7 and just drop it back to f3 here. So the one thing I'm also considering is how I'm going to extricate these pawns here, because I can't advance the c pawn because my uh, this bishop would be hanging. Well, I'm going to go queen to a5, and then with the idea of if he wants to trade queens, I'm fine with that. And then if I have an opportunity, something like rook to d8 or something to would be nice. So let's see. Let's try queen to a5. Hopefully I'm not falling into any type of trap. He does have some pressure here on the king side, so that is the price of the pawn. So if I could alleviate that, then that would be good. So here, queen to a5 is just preventing this queen to e5 move. And still need to find something to do with this bishop. It's a little tricky here because this pawn can become weak. So I have to be careful of that. Uh, Something like rook to d1 would be nice. And I was looking, he has a pin on this f pawn right now, so he can play something like bishop to g3, but he has to do something with his queen first because I have this discovered check and capture of the queen, which would be good for me. So if we were to assess this position, since he's on the clock right now, I'm up a pawn, so material ahead. You can see this C pawn and this B pawn right now or actually the C pawn is a passed pawn, so that will be an endgame advantage if everything else were the same, I guess, if we took off all the pieces off except for the pawns and the kings, for example. Um, what does black have in return for this pawn? Well, he does have a few of his pieces potentially aiming towards my king side. And so part of my thought process is to, oh, got my, hold on one second here. Got my screen a little messed up. Okay, that looks better. Part of my thought process here will be to just keep an eye on that and make sure that there is no attacks on my king that I won't be able to stop. A couple other things about this particular position is that I have the two bishops, and we've talked about the two bishops in other videos. And what it does is it kind of gives us a little bit of an advantage in positions where the center is open, kind of like right now, because you can see if this bishop can get active here on e3 or f4, there's a lot of space that is covered by these two bishops. Um, Tactically, right now, I need to um, find a way to relieve my position first because of the pressure he has on my b pawn. Um, so that's one of the issues I have to solve too. But when you're thinking about what to do on your opponent's move, you don't want to get too, or at least I don't like to get too deep into variations, unless my opponent has a forced, there's some type of forced variation. I try not to get too deep into calculations because he might make a move that makes makes those calculations irrelevant. While I have a moment, I think I'm kind of done thinking about the position for a second. So I want to share with you a couple thoughts. I'm going to be starting either on Wednesdays or Fridays for the next few weeks. I'm going to be doing kind of a introduction to positional play, and what I'm going to do there is talk about the different elements that you want to be looking at when you evaluate positions. Things like king safety and pawn structure. I'm going to go probably make an intro video to discuss um, some of those elements and then maybe break each one down with a couple examples as well as references to books and videos you can watch to enhance whatever I show you on the channel. So hopefully that'll be something. Let me know if that's something that you're interested in. One thing I've noticed when I'm teaching the younger kids is that they really have um, two material elements, positional elements that they know about, which is material and king safety. Everything else is off the board. So they just try to win material and checkmate the opposing king. So I'm trying to teach them other parts of the chess position so that they can make better decisions. Okay, my opponent's made a move here. Rook f to b8. Okay, so that's interesting. And here, again, not quite sure what he's going for. Well, I mean, he's putting pressure on this b pawn, which is a good decision. I think what I'm going to do here, though, is I am going to. Well, a couple thoughts I have. One is that rook to d1 because that forces that queen to move away, and so that is an option. Um, the problem I have right now is that um, I guess is the difficulty in terms of um, how to develop this bishop. Because if I move it somewhere, this b pawn is a goner. So that's one of my issues. Just had a thought pop into my mind though. What if something like bishop to d2, sacrifice this pawn? Because if he does something like, um, let's say, rook takes b2, then I can play bishop to c3, which would fork queen and the rook. Now, he is threatening something here. He is threatening something like bishop to b4, which of course would be unpleasant, but I can easily move my queen away, I think. There's no way to trap me here on the fifth rank. I don't see. Um, so bishop to d2 is another option. Because rook to d1, he has a few things he can do. He can just play something like, say, um, play something like g6, for example. And then there's things I can do there too. So let's see here. I like this bishop to d2 idea. And actually, there's kind of like that idea. Let's explore all the ideas though. So rook to d1 would be something. This pawn is not currently threatened, so that would be something. And there I would just have to be careful of. Well, actually, what Rook to D1 does, which is kind of nice, is it would allow me to play C3 next because this bishop would be um, protected. So let's go ahead and play that. Actually, there's no, there's no real threats of getting pinned or anything. Now he could attack my queen here, and my idea here would be to scooch out and go to say G5. Okay, so he wants to trade off queens, and as I mentioned before, I'm actually fine with that. So let me just look at it. Queen takes, bishop takes, and then I think C3 would be the move. Be the next move, at least. I think I have to do that. So queen takes, and now again I am up a pawn. So um, so this is, let's see. So he's got two attacking here, and I can defend it. So I think what I have to do here is play my rook to b8 or to b1 to protect it twice. Then I can play c3. Then I can move my bishop, and then I think we are back in business here. So um, let's do that. Rook to b1. So here, the idea here is that I have this extra pawn, so I do want to protect it if it's worth it to do so. I just want to make sure there's no reason why I wouldn't do that. Um, and then I can contemplate other things. For example, this rook here is kind of stuck. So if I could attack it, for example, I could play something like g4 and g5 if I have time to get that in. I don't have time to get it in, but um, looks like he's going to double here. So here I'm going to play. Here's where I can play. Well, let's see here. Here's where I can play c3. Oh, actually, I can't because this pawn is pinned. Um, but actually, you know what? I can go ahead and play. That's fine. I can. So I can play b3. The problem there is that then he gets off. He can play something like knight to d5, and with threatening this fork. In which case, I think something like bishop to d2 would defend it. So I'm just going to go ahead and play. I'm wondering if there's something more useful I could play first. I guess. Um, yeah, I think I'm going to play b3 here. So just to repeat, I can't play c3 because this pawn, if he could just take it with the bishop because this rook is hanging. Now, if he doesn't play his knight to d5, okay, he does play his knight to d5. So a couple things I can do here. I can actually pin this knight. So one idea is to play bishop to e4, pinning the knight here. So if he does play here, that would be one thing. The other thing would be I could play bishop to d2, which just protects this square, in which case he could force a trade. But again, I'm not really worried about trades because um, I'm not really worried about trades because I'm a pawn up. Okay. The other thing I can do is play bishop to b2, and then if he trades off, there's no longer that threat of the fork because if he plays his knight here to c3, I just have to move my rook. Okay. So those are some other options. Let's see here. So bishop to e3 or bishop to e4. Problem is right now my rooks are hanging, so that one doesn't look too good. Bishop to d2, and then if he plays his knight here, I have to exchange. So that gets a little annoying. Opposite colored bishops could be a little annoying. Um, I could play bishop to b2 with the idea that he can exchange it, or if he doesn't exchange it, he still plays his knight to c3. I could do something like rook. Could I sacrifice the exchange temporarily and try to trap his piece? Rook to e1, and then if he takes on b1, then I take on e5, but then his knight can go out to a3 maybe. Or I could take with the rook. It could go out here on, go to d2, and now we go back and take it. So actually I like bishop to b2. Let's go for that. One thing I want to be mindful of is I am a little low on the clock, so I might need to make a few moves. You know, I'm not going to calculate these out like I would if I had an hour on the clock. Now, if he does give me a chance, I will go ahead and take on or play bishop to e4 next if I have that opportunity. I'm not sure if I will though. So the reason I mentioned that the opposite colored bishops is that a lot of times, even if you're a pawn up, because of the nature of opposite colored bishop endgames, there are sometimes extra drawing chances for the weaker side. So I was thinking it might be good to avoid that if possible. However, even in that type of endgame, I would have an advantage, especially at this level. Grandmaster opposite colored bishops. A lot of times it's their technique is very good, but seems that is not me and not my opponent, maybe not so much. Although I have had that issue before where I've been up a pawn, even two pawns, because of the nature of the position with the opposite colored bishops. That was a problem. Okay, he goes ahead and takes it. I'm going to take this one. And what's he going to do next? Okay, he's going to attack my rook. So what should I do with it? I think here I can just play my rook to. Could just play it to e1. I'm just trying to see if there's any reason to play it to f1, for example. I think I'm just going to go to. Oh, actually, I can play it to. Can I play it to d2? Because then stays on the e file, and then I can move my bishop out of the way, and that would be decent. You know what I'm going to do? I think e1. Let's stay on. Okay, let's. This is a tough one. I could play. Let's go rook to d2. Now notice you can't pin me. Can't pin this guy right now because I have discovered attack here. I'm thinking he could play knight to a4 is what I was thinking, and then I would just move my rook back to b1, and then it could scooch out again. If he attacks it there. So right now, okay, so here's the problem that he has is that I've got this discovered check. So probably going to resign after this. Okay. And I'm going to win the exchange here. Okay, my opponent resigned. Good game. And let's take a look at a couple of the key. Okay, this first part that we're going to review here is in the opening, and it was after my decision to play e4. And this is exactly the right move to play in this position because of what we talked about. As you saw in the game, after d takes e4, knight takes e4, knight takes e4, queen takes e4, I am now threatening checkmate as well as attacking this weak pawn. So that led to a pawn advantage, which I pretty much held on for the rest of the game. But let's go back real quick and show you, I guess, what would have. Let's go back a couple moves here. The reason I'm showing this next part here is that after e4, black should not take on e4, as you saw, because it leads to the loss of a pawn. Instead, he should play e5. Okay, and then after something like e takes d5, then e takes d4. Okay, and pretty much leading to an even game. But this was the right move to make, and this maneuver here is a common one. Let me show that. Let's go back here. Because one of the threats, besides the threat here, is not necessarily taking on d5. The threat is pushing here with e5, and then white would enjoy a space advantage as well as control of the f6 square with the pawn up here, which would be very difficult for black, and then would allow for attacks. Let me just show you an example. Let's say he played something like b6, then e5 pushes this knight back, and here you can see that this knight is, there's a lot of firepower coming in here against white's king. Now, this particular position might not lead to a checkmate, but that concept of creating that wedge on with the pawns on d4 and e5 is something that black has to avoid. Now, a lot of variations, he's going to avoid that by exchanging on e4 like he did in the game. But as we saw, that tactically doesn't quite work out. So his best option here, which is another one common, and you'll see this in a lot of openings, is to push the e-pawn itself so that my e-pawn can't advance. Okay? So that's our first position. Okay, this next part here involved this decision that I made because of black's knight threatening on c3 and how to handle that. Looked it up and analyzed it a little bit, both by myself and especially with the computer, which helped me come up with the following line, which I'm going to show you. And I don't like showing computer lines unless they, I guess, if they, unless they're going to be something that I've actually might come up with in a game. And I know that seems a little counterintuitive, but sometimes computer engines come up with moves that just don't make sense to humans, and it's not really something that is very helpful for us in terms of learning if our purpose is to learn to play chess better. So one move I looked at was bishop to e4, and this is actually a very interesting line. And after knight to c3, I rejected bishop to e4 because I saw that my rooks were both hanging. But if I would have taken the analysis a little further, bishop takes a8, and then if he takes on d1, then I can trap this knight here. Well, sort of trap it, because this bishop is protecting. Oops, let's see if I can clear those. Okay, let's see. Let's go back and move here. So I can play bishop to d2, and then he can play his knight here, and I would just attack his bishop. So now it's getting a little tense. So here he can actually move, say, to f6, and I can actually just cut off or gain some space here with a4, but this also cuts off his retreat here. And then after rook to b8, bishop to f3, and in this particular position, let's play one more forcing move, which would be rook to d8, and then we have bishop to e3. Okay, so kind of a long line here, but you can see kind of each move flowed into each other. And in this particular position, I do have this solid extra passed pawn here, and with my two bishops being in a very optimal position. You can see here that these bishops cover a lot of a lot of squares. Okay, so this would have been very nice for white. Now those moves are all fairly forcing, and so that's why I'm even showing you this line, because it could be something that I make a threat, my opponent responds to the threat. It could be something that might actually happen. What I did play in the game, though, bishop to b2. The reason why this is also not a bad move. I think white has an advantage here, but after bishop takes b2 and rook takes b2, we do have a little bit of a bind here, and this knight has a very nice position on c3, which is why the bishop to e4 move, even though it involved a little calculation and tactics, might be considered technically better than what I played. Okay, but definitely not a bad move here. Again, I am a pawn up, but he does have some compensation because this knight on c3 will have difficulty being evicted. If I wanted to, though, and actually after analyzing, computer says that the rook to e1 is better. I think rook to d2 is fine also, but it is nice to have this rook on the back rank. The line here that I looked at, again, with the computer as well as myself, is something like this. My idea here is to bring my rook up to attack this knight and get rid of it. So that would be kind of a positional type of thing. Again, I have the advantage with the pawn, and if we can trade off those minor pieces or trade off a rook and then get our kings into play, then the game would have been maybe a little more, that end game would be more favorable for me. Okay, as I mentioned in the previous clip, that rook to e1 instead of the rook to d2 that I played in the game can be considered a little more superior, and the reason why is that this threat, putting it on d2 with just this threat of this discovered attack isn't really a big deal. Black can just play king to f8, and then I can continue on with that plan, as I mentioned before, of trying to get rid of this guy. And then now the problem is that now he can pin this. Okay, so it's kind of annoying, and although it's not really something to worry about too much. Okay, defense here, and then you could put a little pressure here, but then see, now this gets a little annoying because of this pin here. Okay, so that's why rook to d2, it's kind of subtle, so I'm not really too worried about it, but these little details, these calculation details, are something that after you get the basics and are not losing to simple tactics, even though I just won on a simple tactic, these are the subtle things that are going to kind of move you up to that next level. And actually, let's just go back to finish off. Let's just look at that one tactic, because it is a basic tactic and you need to know it. So my opponent here played rook to d8. And his idea, of course, is that pin, but the problem is that I have this check. So you always want to make sure you are checking and making sure that you are taking into account all of your opponent's checks, captures, and threats before you make a move. And this is, of course, a discovered attack on this rook, okay, with check. Here, it's not a discovered check because the check itself wasn't discovered, but the attack is. So that won the game. Actually won the exchange in a pawn, and I was already a pawn up, so I would be up a healthy exchange in 2 pawns, which is fairly easy to win, I think. In any case, I hope you enjoyed the game. Hey guys, hope you enjoyed that video. I enjoyed playing that game and discussing it with you. If you did find it useful, hit that like button. And hope you'll consider subscribing. Better Chess Training is about helping you to become the hero of your chess story. And upcoming, I have a series on positional play and elements of positional play that I think you will find helpful and will help you become that hero. So hit that subscribe button so you can see that series coming up, and looking forward to talking to you soon.